have created a simple 2D project and named it Pin the Circle. This is going to be our first game that we are going to be creating. So now let's get started. The first thing that we are going to do here is we are going to organize our project. So here I'm going to create a folder and I'm going to name it Scenes. And I'm going to save my scene automatically here. And I'm going to name it Gameplay. Next, I will create another folder. I'm going to name it Prefabs. And I'm also going to create another folder, and I'm going to name it Sprites. So now I'm going to open my Sprites folder and I'm going to open my Finder, and here are our assets for our game. So I'm simply going to select all of them, drag and drop them here in my Unity editor. Now, I'm not going to go briefly through, configuring the import settings, because I do that in my course, the other one, where I mention everything, what we are going to do here, what it is, generate mipmaps, how to override, so on and so forth. But going briefly, here we can see the size of our background. So it's 505 by 830. And here for overriding, we can set the size at 1024 and we can set it to be compressed at true color and uncheck this generate mipmaps. This generate mipmaps is generally for 3D, so uncheck it because we don't need it for our 2D game, and hit apply. This is going to configure our sprite for our game, and this here will determine the quality of our game. Make sure that you don't use a smaller number here where you check for the max size. Don't check the smaller number if that number is smaller than the width or the height of your background or any of your assets. So now I'm going to use our circle and pin, and here I'm going to override it at 512, set the true color, uncheck generate mipmaps, and since this is a sprite sheet, meaning we have multiple sprites in one paper or one file, then we are going to select here sprite mode multiple, and now simply hit apply. Now that we have the sprite mode at multiple, we can click here to open the sprite editor and we can slice this out. Simply click on here slice and then click slice. So now we have sliced our sprite. So we can also name the sprite. I'm going to name this one circle. This is going to be the needle head, so needle head, and this one right here is going to be the needle body, so needle body, like this. When you are finished naming your individual sprites, you can simply click here apply to apply that to these sprites. So now we can select each of these sprites and we can simply drag and drop them here in our scene. Now we are going to start with our circle. So simply we are going to add a box collider, or a circle collider to our circle, because this is a circle, and we are going to save it as a prefab. So here in our prefabs folder, we can simply save our circle. And briefly, what are prefabs? Well, prefabs are reusable game objects. So now I have the circle in the scene. If I remove the circle, so if I select it and delete it from the scene, now I don't have that circle anymore. I would need to go here into sprites and drag and drop our circle again. And we see that the circle now does not have the circle collider. So again, I need to filter here for circle collider and add it to the circle. But now when I have the circle collider on my circle and I drag and drop it here as a prefab, and now I can simply delete it from the scene, and now I have the prefab circle or circle prefab. I can drag and drop it here in the scene and we see that it has this circle collider. We can take a look at in the inspector panel right here. It has that circle collider. Now also we have these options here, select avert and apply. And this is for our prefab. So if I change something now, if I set, for example, our circle to be a trigger, I can click here, apply. And this will apply that change to the prefab because the prefab was not set to be the trigger on its circle collider. And if I remove this now and drag and drop our circle prefab, we see that our circle prefab, is a trigger. So each time you make a change, you can click on apply. And when I say make a change, that means if you add a script to this game object, add another collider, add another component, even if you move its position, you can hit apply and that change will be applied to its prefab. Now that we have our circle, let us create our needle. We can go back here in our sprites and I'm going to drag the needle body and the needle head. What I'm going to do is I'm going to position them both at 0, 0 for the X and for the Y, and we can remove the circle from the scene because we don't need it. So here what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the needle body, and let's say on the Y axis I set it to be 0.6 and its head, and I can simply drag them like this so that you can see what I'm doing. And for the needle head, let's say I set it to be 0.8 and 0.8. We are also going to add a circle collider on our needle head. Make sure it's set to be trigger. And now I'm going to create an empty game object. And I'm going to position this game object at 0, 0. And I'm going to name it needle. And I'm also going to drag these two, so first the head and after that the needle body, as the child components of our needle, and reset their positions. So reset at 0, 0, because now we can take this one, or this game object empty that we have created, and now we can drag it, and we drag both of these game objects. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take the needle head and I'm going to position it down here, so something like this, and take the needle body and position the needle body something like this. So now we have this needle right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take our game object, which is the parent, and I'm going to apply a box collider, so not UI. Here I'm going to apply a box collider on it, and also I'm going to apply a rigid body 2D. For the box collider, let's zoom in and I'm going to configure it a little bit. Here in the inspector panel, we see that we have these options for the box collider. So we have the offset for the X and for the Y. So we are going to tweak the size on the X and the offset on the Y. So I'm going to, tweak it to be something like this, just so that it will take the needle's body. And also I'm going to resize it on the Y-axis a little bit because I don't need it to be, this big. So let me just resize it, so something like this. And I'm going to position it here to be, at the top of our needle. So exactly on the top. And let's say 6.88 or 82. So you can play with the numbers in order to position whatever you like. So let's say 87. And let's add one more number, so 88. Okay, this is exactly, how we need it. And as I said, you can play with the numbers in order to position however you like. We might need to change it a little bit more, so here we see, the size of it. We might need to change a little bit more, maybe resize it on the Y-axis or something like this, and again, reposition it depending what we want, but practically this is how are we going to create our needle. And we are practically done with preparing our game objects. The last thing that we need to do is we need to go here in our prefabs, and I'm also going to create folders here. So let me create a folder, and this is going to be our circle prefab. So prefab, and I'm going to drop our circle prefab here, and here I'm going to create another folder, and this is going to be our needle prefab. And simply open the needle prefab folder. As I said, we are done setting up our game objects. So now we can simply drag and drop our needle here, save it as a prefab, and we can continue.